Again, I want to welcome you to Mind Matters at Home. You are going to be in for such a treat today. I'm so excited to welcome Wendi Kozlowski, as she's going to really help us talk a little bit about your brain on anxiety. She is the clinical manager for Pathlight Mood and Anxiety Center, and we're so delighted to have her and to talk in particular about this topic where we know lots of folks are coming to us these days talking about experiencing anxiety for the first time in their lives. So this is a great opportunity to learn a little bit more and help us be better equipped. So I'm going to turn it over to Wendi now and let her tell you a little bit more about herself and to help us all learn a little bit more about our brain on anxiety. Thank you, Wendi.
Thank you so much, Karen and Christina. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here and taking time out of your morning this morning to join us. I'm also super excited about the NAMI walks this year happening on this day, on the 10th of October. I'll actually be joining y'all from the Appalachian Trail, so I'm so excited about that. I can't wait. But coming back to today, we're going to be talking about our brain on anxiety. Like Karen said, you're free to send any messages in the Q&A, any questions that you have. If I don't hit your question in the moment, we'll be circling back afterwards, I think from 12 to 12:30 or around then, given how we talk through this. To circle back and answer the questions that we can afterwards. So I look forward to speaking with you guys today. Like Karen said, my name is Wendi Kozlowski. I'm the clinical manager at Pathlight Mood and Anxiety Center, formerly Insight Behavioral Health Centers. We just rebranded this week, actually, so that's really exciting, and still owned by the same company and all that stuff. All our staff are the same. We're just a little bit more national and decided to brand in a way that really allows us to grow in the ways in which we hope to. So, like I said, thanks for joining. I have been in the mental health field, going on 14 years now in some capacity or another, which always makes me feel really old whenever I tell the kids this, that I've been doing this longer than they've been alive, some of them. But I started as a direct care staff working overnights, and really moved through a variety of different programs and treatment centers along the way, and I'm so happy to be here at Pathlight. It's a great program with wonderful staff and a great mission. So let us join. I'm going to stop your screen sharing, Christina, so that we can share the presentation. Give me just a second, y'all. Apologize about that. Didn't start on the first page. In the meantime, I do see a Q&A. Are your online and family and peer programs open to people who live outside of the Central Texas area? That definitely sounds, Angela, like that's a question for the folks there at NAMI. I'm going to let you answer that real quickly, Karen, while I get
we, I think in this time of the virtual world, I mean, we're trying to reserve some of those spots for folks that are in the Central Texas area, but we know that there's also folks that have been coming to us from outside of that area, and we're open to that. We want to make sure that people get the help that they need when they need it. We do find that in terms of resources, sometimes we're best at meeting those resource needs if they're local, but otherwise, we encourage folks, we're reserving some spots for Central Texas folks. I hope that answers the question.
Awesome. Thank you, Karen. Okay, here we go. Starting our presentation. Oh, it still wants me to start in the middle, y'all. We're not going to be doing that today. We're going to be talking about our brain on anxiety. And I don't know about you guys, but sometimes when my brain's on anxiety, I do jump right ahead, right? So my presentation is right on par with us today. This is my non-disclosure statement. This is a statement that I have to make that just basically says that I'm not getting financial compensation or benefit from any of this, as well as from some of the other resources that I'll be sharing with you guys today. Our learning objectives are pretty straightforward. We're going to define anxiety and talk about some differences, different presentations between adults and adolescents, or children and adolescents. I'd like us to gain an awareness of what's happening in our bodies, and particularly our brains. We're going to talk in general about our bodies, but really dive into our brain as we are talking about our brain on anxiety. and really help identify some helpful therapy modalities and walk away with some tools that you can use in the moment or help loved ones use in the moment. This is normally the part in the presentation, if I was doing this in person with you guys, that I would ask the audience, if you will, to give me some group definitions and experiences with anxiety. As we're in a virtual world today, I really just want you to take a moment real quick and think about what's brought you here. Is it your own experience, the experience of a loved one, students, clients? And when you think about what has drawn you to this presentation and this topic, I really want you to take a moment to think about the experiences that you have with that, both personally and observationally. What comes up, right? And as we go through that and as we talk through this presentation, I hope we can address some of those things that you might struggle with in those moments. And if not, shoot me a question and we'll address it. So the definition, put simply, really is anxiety is a sense of fear and apprehension that puts you on alert. Biologically, it's meant to put us in a heightened state of awareness so that we're prepared to take action with potential threats. That's a really separate from what's happening in our body definition, right? But it boils down to the fight, flight, freeze, fold response to perceived threats. There are things that are happening physiologically, behaviorally, and psychologically. Things are happening in our body, brain, and with our behaviors. There are three primary factors that contribute to anxiety. And those are our biology, our genes, right? What makes us up of. That's not right either. What we're made up of. There you go. Cognitive emotional influences that we have, and chronic stress. I put that in bold and red because I'm sure no one is dealing with some chronic stress right now, right? Even in a typical non-COVID world, it's that start of the school year. There's a lot of different moving parts, y'all. But what's different, anxiety is different than just our typical stress reactions. Clinical anxiety really is an internal response, whereas stress is caused by external influences. But as you can see, when there's those external influences really just compound and we don't have release from that, that can really, really impair and override biology and cognitive emotional influences. So for example, you can have fantastic genes that are not predisposed to anxiety or mental health disorders. You can have supportive families, supportive jobs and work environments and school, and you can kind of have all those things going for you, and still, right, we can have an anxiety disorder, clinical anxiety disorder, that we can attribute to that chronic stress. And so these factors, along with an impact on functioning, right, an impairment in our daily functioning, that's how we define what's considered clinical anxiety versus situational anxiety or stress, if you will. So what does anxiety look like in children and adolescents? And what I can tell you is that it's different than with adults. So if you're an adult who has anxiety, you might be able to see similar traits in your child or in your loved ones, and it also might look really different. What I'll say is we typically see a lot of behavioral and physiological experiences in children and adolescents, right? Sporadic attendance at school, tantrums, aggressiveness, restlessness, a lot of different physical ailments. My tummy hurts, my head hurts, right? All of these things are accurate, but they don't have the right language to communicate exactly what's going on. Very, very often, anxiety can be misdiagnosed as something else. ADHD, mood disorders, anger. Anxiety responses can truly vary individual by individual, and not just child, adolescent to adult. And so anxiety looks like a lot of different things, y'all. I thought I saw a Q&A. I may be jumping ahead, but I've noticed my hand shaking. I'm clumsier than I was before, constantly bumping into things, knocking things over. Are these things anxiety produced? They absolutely can be, Lynn, and kind of like what we were talking about on the previous slide, you can have those physiological reactions, right? Nausea, heart rates increase, right? your hand shaking, like you said. Now, the trick is that a lot of these things could also be attributed to other things. And so especially when you're talking about biological symptoms, things that are showing up, you really might want to just explore that there's not anything medical going on as well. But certainly those things absolutely could be attributed to anxiety. So what lies beneath anxiety? This really parallels excellently with your question. This specifically, these images show how does a child's anxiety show up as something else. With that anxiety iceberg, that's not specific to children or adolescents, right? Us adults can have this as well. And I'll be really honest, even though the picture there on the left, the same is true, I certainly have seen plenty of adults struggling to sleep, over-planning, having avoidance and negativity, difficulty focusing. Chandeliering is a really great example as well, right? Someone who's normally really calm suddenly flies off the handle and really gets perseverative in their thoughts and kind of, you know, goes on a rant rage. That's an example of that chandeliering. Over-planning is something that can really trick us and make us confuse that this is anxiety. We think that maybe our kids are just being super diligent in school. They're using their planner. They're learning how to navigate all of these different tasks that they're being asked to do. And we usually see one or the other, right? I'm going to fold and not plan anything and just wing it, or I'm going to over-plan and really struggle with anything that kind of gets in the way of my original plan. I'll be real honest, that is one of my primary defenses to anxiety, is when I start getting real rigid with I'd like this to be this way, this way, this way, that's a huge flag for me that I'm feeling anxious and feeling overwhelmed. I had another QA. I have been informed that I speak like Yoda. Why is this anxiety? That's an interesting question, Patricia. What I'll say, what I'm aware of imagining is that you might approach anxiety in a way that puts you in your intellectual brain, right? And makes you kind of speak in a way that is less connected to your emotions and your experience in your body, and more kind of like Yoda, right? In this intellectual and hypothetical kind of approach as a way to kind of detach yourself from anxiety. We'll talk a little bit more about our brain and kind of how that works together. Is there a term for having panic attacks while sleeping, specifically waking up during sleep, gasping for air, chest pain, and tachycardia? There are different terms that can be used to describe this. Things like night terrors, all of those things can be happening in your body. When you're sleeping, your brain is reprocessing kind of the day and pruning things that are happening that you've experienced. And so certainly that can hijack your sleep. It's also really interesting, I've heard, Valerie, that depending on the time that you're waking up, that could also maybe play out where your anxiety is stuck in your body, certain functions. And so we're not going to talk a lot about that. This is another great example of how anxiety and physical symptoms, we really want to make sure that we're making sure there's not something else medically going on, because they can really parallel each other. You know, if I have a kid who's been missing school and presenting with a lot of physical ailments, before I can really dive deep into the therapy work, I have to make sure that they don't have an ulcer or that they don't have some kind of gastro infection. Same thing with extreme headaches, if there's not something more neurological going on. And so I really do encourage you guys to explore that. And then if there is still those symptoms that is not explained by something medical that's happening, absolutely can be attributed to anxiety. All of these things that you guys are describing. Great questions. Again, we're looking for what's underneath, and all these questions are exactly that. I'm having these symptoms. Wait, it might be anxiety. There's stuff that's happening underneath. And often we avoid, or we're detached from what's happening underneath, because to address it can really impact our functioning, right? Can really impair us from doing the day-to-day things that we need to. And at least for adults, that's been a lot of primary ways that people attempt to cope with or address it. And like I said, one of the primary differences between typical anxiety and clinical anxiety is the impairment in functioning and the inability to function. And so some of these things might be your way of coping with, I mean, let's just face it, a really chaotic world right now. And if it's not impairing your functioning, it might not be clinical anxiety, but there's still a lot of these skills, in fact, most of them, that are going to work regardless. Whereas if it is more of a clinical anxiety, there might need to be some combination of therapy and medications or those kinds of things. I'm going to move us forward. So we've been talking a lot about this a little bit already. What's normal, right? We've addressed that anxiety exists in a lot of different levels. What's normal and what can we expect? Anxiety disorders are the most common disorder to occur in childhood and adolescence. 13 out of every 100 children ages 9 to 17 is dealing with a diagnosable clinical anxiety disorder. And so I spell that out because, again, we've been talking about how we can all have anxiety, right, especially this year of all years. And yet, what's the difference between anxiety and a clinical anxiety disorder? This statistic is specific for clinical diagnosable anxiety, which is a pretty incredible number. And we can trace symptoms back to age 6, back to elementary school, which connects a lot to attachment as well, which is a whole other topic, so I won't jump down that path. Of this 13%, only 18 actually seek mental health treatment. And so that calculates out to only 2 of every 100 children who are needing psychiatric or therapeutic intervention actually receiving treatment. And so that really makes me think about how these numbers affect our classrooms, affect our relationships. Those of you who are adults, all the ways that this has gotten stuffed since we were in elementary school. And so it can be a really tricky thing to start to unravel and address. And it can be something that a lot of us really struggle to address because of that. And we've come to define a lot of our experience as normal. And so just some statistics to be aware of. Often we're not starting to look for or find effective help until early adolescence. And that's because this is when schoolwork starts to get a lot harder. And we're not, and again, that impairment in functioning happens. For those of us who are adults, Karen and I were talking earlier this morning about how this year has really brought a surge of adults in particular, and adolescents and children too, who have never really experienced impairing anxiety. And it really, I think, boils down to the same topic of the requirements of life right now are just that much more challenging, and our ability to function has greatly been shifted. Before I answer the couple of questions that I see have come in, I want to finish this thought here because it's really important that when we think about what's normal and what's abnormal, we also really pay attention to developmental factors, right? School-aged kids have not fully learned self-control. They're still developing social skills. They're learning how to handle aggression, control their urges and emotions, how to make friends, keep friends, prune friends that are not helpful. And if we don't think about those things from developmental milestones, we can then set unrealistic expectations for kids, which can be a feedback loop with this anxiety. And I think it's really, really important for us adults in children's lives to think about the fact that we are teaching them and that we are asking them to practice adult-level skills. I know a lot of adults, y'all, who don't know how to handle aggression, how to control their urges. And so our expectations of our kids are really, really important and can absolutely be a factor in this feedback loop of anxiety. Let me take a look at this Q&A. Oh, this is a great question. I work customer service, which is over the phone. How do I manage and tackle at work? We are going to circle back to some specific skills and things that you can use in the moment. And I will absolutely encourage you to think about those and use those things at work. One of the things I find that's most helpful for myself, especially when doing things like this or being on a call, slowing myself down, taking a moment to breathe, taking those breaks, and really not moving forward faster in a way to kind of move through something. But I'll give you some more specific skills later, and And please circle back if that doesn't quite answer your question. That's kind of closer to the end of the presentation. Okay, so that makes complete sense. If the question here is, please do, it's really making my anxiety ramp up. Absolutely. Again, that goes back to that feedback loop, right? When being anxious about being anxious is a real thing, you guys, because again, it impairs our functioning and it keeps us from doing things that we know we're capable of. And so then there's this internal negative thought loop. Again, you guys are on it with the questions today, because here are some important facts about defining anxiety, and really about anxiety for a lot of adults here. Like depression, women are twice as likely to be affected, especially at a clinical level of diagnosis. The effects of this chronic stress can be linked to a variety of physical symptoms, which you guys have already identified as well, right? Weight gain, weakened immune system, heart disease, other medical issues as well. And a lot of this comes back to the extended cortisol release and what's happening in our brains, which we'll be getting to here shortly. This wear and tear can absolutely increase our risk of other factors too, like depression and dementia. And so again, here we are talking about a feedback loop between our brain and our body. We overestimate the likelihood of negative future events, those of us who are anxious. I say we because I am. We underestimate how much power we have over these negative situations, right? I'm on this phone, I'm trapped, I can't get out of this situation, and we start to really catastrophize. And that, it just increases that panic, right? Oh, the overplan to accommodate all future possible scenarios. Y'all, I got a plan. What is it now, beta, like moving forward out of the alphabet here. We fail to lower pessimism after success. So here's the thing. Even if I do a great job and I get through that anxious moment, I don't acknowledge that success, right? You get through a day of work where you work through that anxiety and stay on a call. You don't go, oh, man, look at me, I can handle this anxiety. Instead, it really, we sink in and we perseverate about our failures. We have a hyper-focused attention system, and what we'll talk about in a minute too is how our memory and our attention are negatively impacted by heightened anxiety. And so we have a hyper-focus, but also an inability to keep that focus, which is so challenging to deal with in the moment. We're also really blind to safety options, and we're going to talk a lot more about that. It's really, really hard for us to know how to regulate and soothe in the moment. And so sometimes when we talk about what are some skills to intervene with anxiety, they might sound really kind of basic, and you might be like, oh, but it's so much more than that. And while that's true, I agree, one of the things that's really important is that we have to regulate back to safety before we can take those next steps forward. And I'll be talking a lot more about that here in a minute. So what's normal, right? We need anxiety, right? So I answered this question live. I'll come back to that. This may be coming later, but what are some ways that adults in a kid's life, I'm an assistant principal, can help them in those anxious moments when it's not recognized by their parent and guardian? Great question. We're going to be absolutely coming to some things to try in the moment that you can do with kids, that you can do with yourself, that these skills can absolutely be used regardless of other people's agreement with that reality, if you will. Great question, Cassie. Okay, so Cornell University Center for Teaching and Learning did a correlation study between anxiety and performance, and what they found is too little anxiety results in a lack of motivation. I don't care about the outcome. Why bother, right? That's the fold, that's the shutdown. However, high anxiety negatively affects our memory and concentration. Those of you with kids or working with kids, you all know that, I don't know. What'd you do at school today? I don't know. What'd you eat for lunch? I don't know. What happened? You got so upset? I don't know. That can be infuriating to us as adults. And the reality is with heightened anxiety, it's a very, very normal biological thing that's happening in their brain where they might not be able to remember truly. And same thing what we were talking about with concentration earlier, right? I have this super hyper focus, and yet I can't hold on to it, and our concentration is off. We know we need to do the thing, and we can't do the thing, right? And that's an executive functioning component that anxiety can really hijack. So we need moderate levels of anxiety to create motivation that's needed, yet too much can really put a hamper on that. I really like this image of which is it, everyday anxiety versus a clinical anxiety disorder. And it really does kind of give this comparison between what's normal and what's abnormal. And again, I want you guys to think about these different examples that it's giving here in comparison to that very first slide that was talking about our biological responses, our cognitive, emotional, and chronic stress. So if I have everyday anxiety, but I also have chronic stress on top of it, it's very likely that it could also be combined into an anxiety disorder. And so does that dissipate over time? Maybe. It depends on a lot of influential factors. Okay. So what's happening to me? I'll come back to some of these questions that I see here in the chat versus in the Q&A. So give me just a few minutes, y'all. This is a really important topic here, this paper tigers. There's a fantastic movie out there, and I remember you, Cassie, saying you're an assistant principal. This movie is called Paper Tigers, and it's about a school in the Northwest that approached education and intervention in the school system, really focusing on what we in the mental health world call the ACEs, or Adverse Childhood Experiences. And in the process of this movie, it really talks about this concept of paper tigers, and it's such a fantastic topic because the feeling of anxiety is your body's stress response, right? Your fight, flight, freeze, and fold is triggered, and your system is flooded with norepinephrine. I can't say it, but it's because I'm anxious, y'all, and cortisol. So these chemicals are biologically designed to give us a boost in perception, right? That hyperfocus, our reflexes, our speed. Back when we were not in modern society, right, we needed these systems to get us moving and running from real tigers, right? Our heart rate increased, we got more blood to our muscles, more air to our lungs, and in general, you were ready to deal with whatever threat is present. Your body is fast, light, and ready, which usually means things are coming out the front end or the back end, right? Our appetite decreases because I don't need to be digesting food if I'm about to be food. But here in our modern society, we're not running from real tigers right now, right? But the thing is our body cannot tell the difference between a real tiger and a paper tiger. We're going to talk about the brainstem in a minute and what's going on. As you guys see me kind of flashing my hand forward, up, and down like this. Your amygdala, your limbic system, it does not have this rational brain online, and I'll go through and kind of talk to these pieces in a minute to tell you that this is a paper tiger. And what's really tricky, and I think back to those of us who are supporting children, adolescents, or even adults who are anxious, if you are someone coming at them with your full brain on, right, your rational frontal lobe on, and they've flipped their lid and they're in their amygdala and their limbic system, you telling them, this is just a paper tiger. School's not scary, it's not dangerous, you'll be fine. They think you're colluding with this tiger. You're going to get them killed, right? And so now you are also a threat. And this can be incredibly challenging when we're dealing with supporting people who are in panic. And so even with yourself, right, when you're trying to rationalize with yourself and your body is screaming, no, 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 this is not safe, it's really, really important to validate the experience that's happening in our body and to soothe this limbic system before these other parts of our brain can come back online. If you try to do that too soon, you are now also a threat, and this person is going to reject you and push you away. And here on the right here, just a variety of problems arise when our bodies never turn off our fight and flight response, and we live in this state. And y'all, this year is a perfect example of that. Even those of us who normally are able to have those ups and downs are really, really struggling to regulate and stay regulated. Perfect example that I had yesterday. I'm doing a presentation this week and one next week, and in our process of rebranding, we had to get new emails and all of that. I had to reboot my computer, and my presentation for next week, I had one slide that was saved out of 20. Oh. And my ability to really regulate myself and breathe and work through that moment and not have a complete and utter panic was impaired by all of the other stresses that are going on in the world right now. And it took me a good, and I hate to admit this, about 4 hours and a conversation with somebody else for me to go, oh, I emailed that to myself on Monday. I do have the whole thing in another folder. I knew that, but my brain could not remember that or concentrate on that. I was stuck in the fear. And everyone trying to tell me, oh, you've got this, you'll figure it out. You just, you've got to transfer it to the new PowerPoints anyway. No, you're not validating me. So even those of us who are professionally, clinically trained can fall into these traps. And so I really, really encourage you guys to find ways when we talk about interventions to just give yourself some space for that. I did see a Q&A question pop up. Can a copy of these slides be mailed? I'm having trouble reading them on my phone screen. I don't have a problem with that and can send them forward to Christina and Karen. I do also have another handout that I'd love to pass on, and we'll get to that. And oh, yes, I would have cried. I tell you that I almost did, and the only reason why I didn't was because I didn't have time to. That evening, I about lost it. So anyways, here we are. And I had the slides. So then, of course, the negative self-talk comes in, right? Oh, why couldn't you remember that? You would have saved yourself so much frustration. And then the highs and lows of those chemical releases that were happening in my body were so real, right? As soon as I realized I had them, I crashed, right? And I was like, oh. But then it was really hard for me to keep doing other things because my body had been flooded for so long. Anyways, again, this is real, y'all, and it can really impair our ability to do day-to-day things and functioning. This is a cross-section of our brain, kind of moving forward. And I give this example to really just help you see that there's a lot of different things that are going on in our brain. But several key pieces, several parts of the brain are key actors in the production of fear and anxiety. So scientists have discovered that the limbic system, which I talked about a little bit previous in the other slide, specifically the amygdala and the hippocampus, play larger and significant roles in most anxiety disorders. So in MRIs and cross-sections, we can see that these are either much larger or even sometimes much smaller with those people who have anxiety disorders who have been dealing with them for a long time, which is fascinating. Today we appreciate that anxiety is a result of constant chatter that's happening between a number of different functions of our brain. And so I know just a few minutes ago I was doing this thing with my hand. This is where I really wanted to show y'all, because this is your brain, right, on your hand. And this part right here, this is the brain stem, or the spinal cord as this image shows, right? And inside, in this middle, where my thumb is, this right here is the limbic system, the amygdala, the hippocampus, right, the pituitary gland, the hypothalamus, all of these, what we call the lizard brain part of our brain, right? These are those early biological things that are telling us, danger, Will Robinson, you're being chased by a real tiger, right? And then these other larger parts of the brain, these are our frontal lobes, right? These are our thought processes. This is our reasoning, rational center. And I want you guys to remember that in children and adolescents, this part of our brain is not fully developed. Usually they say until about 25. I'm going to say that again, 25. So that's 10 years past high school, y'all. And again, we are asking these children to do adult level things. That's incredible that they're even able to sometimes meet expectations. But they are, because this part of our brain is slowly starting to come online. And so one of the things we say in therapy is you flipped your lid, right? I lost my frontal lobe here, like I did yesterday, when I realized my presentation was gone, right? And I was all in my feels. I was in my amygdala, I was in the hippocampus, hypothalamus, right? All of these things, my body was being flooded with chemicals and hormones telling me that I was in danger, I'm an imposter, all the things that are happening. And even though I had things that were slowly putting this back online, right? When I would be invalidated, either by myself or someone else, right back into it. And so this is a really great thought model of what's happening in our body. And we really, truly have to meet and soothe this part of our body with any skills that we're doing before we can have a rational, logical conversation. I cannot talk to somebody who's in panic about what's happening in their brain. I have to soothe this part of their body before we can get there. An analogy that I always like to use, especially with parents, is you can't teach someone to swim who's drowning, right? Or flip that. You can't teach someone who's drowning how to swim. You have to get in there and rescue them and probably work through now some trauma and anxiety around getting back in the pool to learn how to swim before you can really teach them how to swim. And the same goes here. Kind of like a couple of you guys were saying earlier, I'm starting to panic about being panicked, right? I'm scared of getting into that space where I'm vulnerable and might drown again. And so I'm going to step away and either pretend it's not happening or have heightened responses when I start to see symptoms of that happening. So there's a lot that's happening in our brain. Okay, but we're going to talk about the amygdala here for a minute, y'all. I really love this image because I just think it's so accurate. He is a little, just a small structure in our brain, but he has such big power. And it's deep in our brain, right? It's in this part of our brain. It's believed to be a communications hub between the parts of our brain that process incoming sensory information and the parts that interpret it. And so, again, thinking back to the paper tigers concept, I'm interpreting school or work, right, to be dangerous. I'm having a sensory sensation of fear, right, and my other parts of my body are interpreting these things as actual tigers. And so, and then of course our amygdala, being the bully that they are, can absolutely push out anyone who tells him otherwise, because his job is to alert the rest of the body that there's a threat present, and it triggers that response. Interestingly enough, as well, emotional memories are stored in the central part of the amygdala, and so that can also impact, anxiety disorders that have very specific fears, like dogs, spiders, flying, swimming, right? And so again, this is not a rational, reasonable part of our brain. The hippocampus is another part of our brain that we're really going to be talking about, because it's a part of the brain that encodes the threatening events into memories. I've had this experience, and now it's so ingrained that if I see water, right, or if I see a dog, there's that fear response. And it's almost automatic that these things happen. And we'll talk about that just a little bit more here in a minute. Studies have shown that the hippocampus appears to be smaller in victims of child abuse, those who served in military combat, and those who exhibit and experience chronic stress and anxiety. And so these parts of our brain are shrinking or enlarging based on our interaction with the world, and more importantly, our interpretation or even misinterpretation of these experiences. And yet, our hippocampus is crucial for processing long-term and contextual memories. But unfortunately, the only kinds of memories that come up in crisis are the things that support that we need to be fearful of that, right? It's that confirmation bias. So in other words, the only memory files available for immediate conscious awareness are the ones of failure, the ones of threat and danger. And like we talked about earlier, the files that are connected to our success, certainty, and safety, they become really inaccessible. And so anyone trying to pull those out of us, right, we dismiss that because we're being chased by a tiger and you're going to get me killed, right? When we look at the functions of the hippocampus and why it's important, what does it do? It consolidates new memories from short to long. And so again, if it's consolidating memories, we were talking about sleeping, right, and how that happens often when we are sleeping, taking something that's happened short term, like the many crises of this year, right, and encodes them into long-term memories. And so if this is activated so much and all we can pull out are these negative emotions and these negative memories, that's going to be converted into long-term memory. And that's essentially what we're going to continue to be able to access. So again, it's that feedback loop that feeds each other. It connects to our emotions, right? Like somebody said, I would have been crying. Oh yeah, that's a biological hippocampus response right there. I had no control over it, except for to try to push it away. And it's not happening, I don't have time for this. Our spatial orientation, like someone said before, I'm running into walls, I'm not paying attention to these other objects that are in my space in my room, I don't see them. That's your hippocampus, right? And our ability to learn new information. And so based on these functions, we can really see how vital the hippocampus and the hippocampus functioning appropriately and actively is important to everyone, and especially even more so to our children and adolescents whose brains are not fully developed and are really often functioning in that space of our lizard brain, right? And so kind of talking a little bit further about the amygdala and hippocampus, what's happening, how does this happen, right? Some more images of our brain. We get the stimuli, right? And if we're in fight, flight, freeze, or fold, well, let me go back. If you look at this image here in the bottom kind of right corner, the one that's yellow, that's got the little arrows moving around, if we're not anxious or in a normal environment, or when we're not dealing with chronic stress, we're going to get the emotional or the sensational experience, the stimulus. It's going to go through our body, our thalamus is going to process it, and then it's going to go through our rational sensory cortex, right? And then we're going to be able to have an emotional response to it using our whole brain. But when our brain is hijacked, it just skips that sensory cortex, that frontal lobe completely, and it goes that short route, right? I have a stimulus, I have a response. And usually the amygdala is a control, and when I say y'all, he's not always right. And he's often wrong, and again, very much focused on reinforcing the negative experience. Do you give a presentation on how anxiety influences college students? I'm a volunteer with NAMI, and this information would be wonderful for our NAMI on campus clubs. You know, I get pulled to do a lot of different presentations in the community. I'd be happy to do one. I don't have one specific for college students, but again, some of these things really do parallel. I've given talks at a college campus. I've given them at a school as well as to the broader community. So I definitely could follow up with you more on that, Valerie. Okay. So we all kind of understand what's happening to us in our brain. Now what do we do about it, right? Everyone's been waiting for this part, right? The very first thing that we need to talk about doing is changing our perspective. And y'all, there are 3 laws to terrible experiences. You really want it to be over with. You want to know what caused it. And why is my least favorite curse word, because it'll send us down a rabbit trail that really doesn't always matter. But we want to know so we can stop doing it and avoid doing whatever caused it again, right? This is just in general of terrible experiences. But when you add anxiety, there's this 4th thing that happens. And we attribute this unpleasant experience, this terrible experience, to things about our character, things about us as a person. So I'm sorry, y'all, I'm going to use an example that's pretty graphic about diarrhea. And I use this because, again, what does anxiety do? It makes us fast, light, ready. We're throwing up. We're having diarrhea, right? Our body is ready to run. But yet, when we have this horrible case of diarrhea, does that say anything about our relationships and the quality of who we are as people? If I experience discomfort in my joints, does that invalidate, like, my ability to see the beauty and the wonders of life? Indigestion, heartburn, joint pain, loss of certain faculties, right? These are a result of biological processes that occur without our conscious involvement, right? I'm not choosing to have joint pain when the weather changes, right? I might know that my anxiety is causing this diarrhea episode, right? But now I'm also turning it inward. This is something about me, right? I'm not worthy of love. Nobody would love me because I'm so anxious, right? My friends must hate me because I always cancel on them. I can't contribute to the world because I can't get through a work day without really being in panic. This is something that mental health and anxiety disorders do to us. They add this 4th perspective, right? And the reality is that these are purely physical sensations that are arising in our body, that are connected back to biological responses, and they have nothing to do with the quality of our character. There's no connection between these things, and yet we connect them. And so your explosive diarrhea tells me absolutely nothing about who you are as a person other than that you are in a body, right? Your anxiety tells me that you as a person experience anxiety, right? That doesn't mean that you are not worthy or capable or able to contribute. And so it's really, really important that we, not just as support people and individuals who experience anxiety, but those of us just existing in this world, that we really think about anxiety and all mental health issues from this mindset, right? And the ways that we accommodate it in our schools and our workplaces and in our friendships and our relationships. Super important. And if there's one thing that you do differently, it is truly changing this perspective. Now, just like if I broke my leg, right? And I'm like, I can probably figure out how to set that. Is my leg gonna be actually correct? It might function, right? But I'm gonna deal with issues resulting from it for the rest of my life, because I'm not a doctor and I really don't know what I'm doing. I just think I know what I'm doing because I've seen Grey's Anatomy, right? Really acknowledging that if anxiety and anxiety disorders or mental health of any kind is impacting your functioning and impacting your quality of life, it is really important that we are getting and receiving help, that we're not trying to put a bandage on this in any ways. There are a lot of therapy modalities that can be incredibly helpful for anxiety disorders, for other mental health disorders as well. And so I really do encourage you to certainly use these skills, but also explore getting actual medical treatment. Again, both to make sure that there's not a medical biological result or reason for some of these symptoms that some of you guys have described, but also because, again, my job is to help you learn how to reset your brain. And I can give you some immediate things that are going to hijack that initial cognitive process, but to really do that work and dive in, we have to use, what is the word that I'm looking for? Research-based methods that we know, and we have statistics that are actually going to make a difference long-term here. CBT, DBT, ACT, exposure and response prevention, these are all really helpful modalities. Mindfulness, which is a core tenet in DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. In fact, this little butterfly image, these are the 4 kind of core chapters of DBT: mindfulness, emotional regulation, distress tolerance, interpersonal effectiveness. These are the areas that they really focus on. And I highlight that because my program, which is a PHP, or partial hospitalization and intensive outpatient program, we are a primary DBT-based program, although we utilize almost all of these modalities as well. We do CBT groups, we do ACT groups, I do a group on radically open DBT, mindfulness, lots of expressive movement activities that we do. We don't have equine therapy or animal-assisted therapy here, but what I can tell you is for those of us who are super anxious and shut down, or who are not really into the talk therapy side of things, especially like younger kids or adults who've maybe been stuffing this for so long, I just can't talk about it, equine therapy can be incredibly helpful. And I've seen wonderful things happen from it. So again, if talk therapy on a couch is not your thing, that's okay, right? There's a lot of different ways that we can come at this and combat this. Play therapy for younger children is incredibly important. Play is children's language, y'all. In fact, there's some really excellent research out there that says, when we're learning new things, it can take 200 to 300 repetitions. 200 to 300 repetitions to learn that new thing, right? Oh, it takes 29 days to change a habit. The same concept, right? But when you incorporate play, that drops to 20 to 30 repetitions. That's a huge difference, right? Especially when I work with these kids here, they're like, oh my God, we're talking about this again. Oh, miss, I've done a diary chain before, right? I've done a behavior chain. You've told me about this amygdala thing before, miss. Like, okay. But this is what we're talking about, when we can be playful, when we can be silly. But a lot of us adults really struggle to let that happen. And so I'm highlighting this part of modalities because I think it's incredibly important to not dismiss it. And what is one of the things that immediately gets removed from a kid who's acting out at school? Recess. It's so important that these things are things that kids have access to. We do a lot of family therapy and family work here at my program. It's incredibly important because again, what is one of the primary factors is our social emotional influences that we have, right? And so the people who we're surrounded with and how they interact with this diagnosis and these behaviors and experiences can be incredibly powerful. This is also why I put parent coaching, because sometimes what can be most helpful is just the ways that the adults in our lives intervene. And that is incredibly powerful, this role that we have. And then, of course, crisis intervention was needed, right? Just like with anything else, if things are not working and we are stuck here, we do have to have intervention. I saw a question pop up. When you go to a mental health professional, are they usually experienced in certain therapies? Great question, Denise. Would you look for specific types of therapy first or a provider if you have any suggestions? This is a fantastic question. Yes, most of us do have certain niche modalities that we use. And what I'll say is, and this is my opinion as a clinician, I have found what's most important over the specific modality is the therapeutic connection and rapport. I can give you DBT skills all day long, but if you don't like my style, you're not going to use it, right? And that's okay. I am not for everyone. I'm a super direct person, and sometimes that comes across in a way that is not a good fit for you as a client, or I'm speaking for myself personally, but sometimes it's not a good fit. And so what I generally tell people is to have an idea of the different modalities and to think about what is helpful. And you can do some research on these different modalities and what's the pros and cons. And I know that there's other presentations out there that go through these things. And you can absolutely look for specific type of therapy provided. But again, I would find 3, maybe 4 people that you've looked at their website, you've maybe even done like a phone call with. Most therapists will do like a 30-minute screening call to see kind of how we approach therapy, and then go to therapy with them and interview them, right, and see what being in a session would be like, and then from there make a choice, right? And you can tell them, and I encourage you to, saying I'm interviewing, I'm seeing a couple of different options, and then making that choice from there. Because again, while modalities are important, it's the therapeutic relationship that drives change. You're welcome. I do see that I definitely have questions here in the chat, so we will come to that. It's just easier for me to access the Q&A in the moment, y'all, so I'm not ignoring you, I promise. This is a really helpful, great tool that's easy to use in the moment. It's called Stop Anxiety, right? And there are a couple different things that we want to do in this stop method. We want to surprise our brain, right? So we want to do something that's going to kind of shake it out. Sometimes, though, I just want to caution you, this might not always work how you think it might, right? If you are not in this space, you're in this space, and you go and you like, scare a person who is, again, now you're a threat. And so just be conscious of the ways you surprise your brain. An easy trick that you probably see people doing is having like a rubber band on their wrist, right? When a troublesome thought pops up, you can snap it on your wrist, say stop. There are a lot of different ways that you can do things like that. There's some apps that do similar kinds of things that you can like track every time you're having those anxious thoughts, and it'll like shake the phone or whatever. With the things like the snapping, I just caution you guys, especially with children and adolescents, there's sometimes self-harm things that can kind of come in line with these, and self-harm and suicidal ideation is something I do other presentations about, and so there's some nuances there. But again, to stop the anxiety, we've got to surprise it. We've got to talk to our brain. We've already been talking about how important talk is, and how anxiety can hijack our positive thoughts and increase the negative thoughts. And so positive self-talk is so important to replacing those negative thoughts. If you're going to come up with a plan for all the ways this thing could go wrong, make sure you follow through in all the ways that it could go right, too. How many of y'all do that? I certainly didn't yesterday, which is why I could not remember that I emailed myself my presentation, because I forgot about that plan that I had made because I was focused on these ones, right? But in the big picture, is your situation as threatening as it feels? Again, this is this part of the brain, so you've got to be careful. Repeating positive mantras, positive affirmations, these things are really important, even if you don't believe them at first. There's this concept in therapy called act as if, right? If I was not panicking about the loss of my presentation, how would I be acting? Oh, I'd be slowly and diligently working on it. It's a similar concept to, in eating disorder treatment, we talk about mechanical eating, right? And it's a similar thing in that even if I can't enjoy the taste of my food, I'm putting it in my body because I know it's going to give me fuel and I know it's something my body needs. A similar thing happens with anxiety, right? Because again, our body has ejected things, and digestion is a process that we only do when we're safe. If I'm mechanically eating in a way, it can absolutely help my body feel safe. Now, again, careful, because this can easily turn into mindless eating, right? Which I'm sure nobody in this group, let's see how many of us, 124 have done during this pandemic, right? But it can also be part of our ways to soothe ourselves because we're trying to give a message to our body that we're safe. And so if this is something that you do, finding other ways to tell your body you're safe can really kind of help hijack that plan. Open your breathing. Y'all, this is one of those skills that seems so flippin' basic. Just breathe. And as a therapist, that used to always bother me because it's not that simple. But the reality is this is another hijack that you can do because, again, if I'm breathing slowly and deeply and calmly, do you see how already my voice has changed? My diaphragm is different. I'm sending signals to my body that I don't need to have that rapid breath, that my heart doesn't need to be racing faster because I'm not in threat and I'm not in danger. So if I can slow down and breathe, I am hijacking, again, that system. Pay attention to what your body's doing. Watch how your muscles clench up and your chest tightens. I use this example, and if my mom is on this presentation, which she probably is, she's going to hate that I use this example, but it's true. When I was little, I would get super anxious. Surprise. But a lot of this really started, sorry, Mom. We were told that a family friend had died, and because we were little, we were just told that he died in his sleep. Because there was information that my parents, now know, did not think was appropriate for us to know. And so 7-year-old Wendi was also scared of dying in her sleep, right, of swallowing my tongue, because I thought that this is just a thing that could happen. And so one of the things that was most helpful for me, without even realizing I was doing it, was those tense and relax each muscle group. And it really helps you recognize that you have control of what's happening in your body. Start at your toes, go all the way up to your head, and all the way back down, breathing while you do that. Of course, I try to fight every which way to go to sleep, right? Reading until 4 o'clock in the morning and all the things. And it wasn't until much later that I was really able to have words to articulate this conversation. We're talking, again, high school probably. That I was able to communicate to them what was happening for me. And they're like, oh, no, Wendi, he was doing drugs, right? You're not. You're not going to swallow your tongue. But again, 7-year-olds don't have language to truly be able to communicate that the way that us adults think that they should be able to. So sorry for that little hijack personal story, but I think it's really great to highlight how sometimes your body knows what it needs to do. And sometimes these skills might seem kind of basic, like the muscle relaxation or the breathing, but it really is soothing and sending signals to our body that we're safe, even if our brain is still telling us that we're not, okay? And so those can be incredibly powerful skills. Something else that we want to do is this P, practice a new behavior. Find something that is going to really let you take a break from whatever, contributing to your anxiety. So for those of you who are having anxiety at work, right, what's a soothing place? What's your happy space that you can look? I've been super stressed this last month. There's a lot going on. We're launching our new brand, all these different things, right? I work in a high crisis environment, and I have a trip coming up when I'm going hiking on the Appalachian Trail. And so I have an image in the background, and that whenever I start to really need it, I'll pull that up and I'll look at it for about 5 minutes, which my anxiety is going to hijack my work for 5 minutes anyways, y'all. And I'll be able to really put myself there and put myself in that space and take a mental break in a way that soothes me and calms me and helps me relax. Now, was I able to do that yesterday when I was panicked about my presentation? Oh, no. right? I had to use other skills. This is that logic brain that's on versus when it's not, right? And so thinking about things that make you feel relaxed and calm, whatever that looks like for you, and making that a priority when you feel anxious, that is practicing a new behavior, right? That's acting as if you don't have anxiety, which is different than fake it till you make it, because fake it till you make it is not accurate. What is this Q&A? Can I sign up with you or offer telehealth PHP? I'm going to encourage you, Tina, to reach out to me afterwards, and I can let you know how that works. I hope that answers your question. But yes, we do have virtual PHP, virtual IOP, as well as on-site PHP, because what we found is that a lot of folks who are really in the throes of mental health and anxiety disorders are really struggling with this virtual world thing. I'm struggling with it as a presentation model. Okay, some other things that we can do in the moment. Oh, what is this that I've said, y'all? Slow down. Intentionally starting here, connecting with our body, which is the exact opposite of what your anxiety brain wants you to do, right? The 5 senses check-in. There's a couple of different ways you can do this. It's called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And you see that down here under grounding exercise because it is a grounding exercise. You would start with 5 things that I can see. My calendar, my diploma, my computer, this pillow here, my clock. 4 things that I can touch. My mouse, my computer, my desk, my knee. 3 things that I can hear. 2 things that I can taste. And 1 thing that I can smell. You can honestly do these in any order. If you can find 5 things that you can smell, awesome. It doesn't matter what order you do them in, but you're connecting to your senses, right? And it really does. It slows you down, and it puts you back in your body. And this is something that you can do super quickly, and you don't even realize how much it pulls that back. And so this is definitely something I encourage those of you who are working in a school with a kid when they're in that panic, or not just the school, right, with your kids or with yourselves. When that panic starts, slowing things down, what are 5 things you see right now? Because anxiety is about future, right? And depression is a lot about the past. And so grounding skills, these things bring us to the here and the now. And so what I'm communicating to my body is that here and now is safe. So the only time that grounding skills really are not helpful is if the here and now is not safe. If that truly is a tiger, right? Or if there is abuse that is going on in their current world. Those are some things to think about. So if you find that that's not working, there might be something else going on. Chair, wall push-ups are another great tool to use. This is activating our body. This is getting us moving. This is kind of hijacking our brain, thinking that we are getting through in a moment. It's moving those chemicals around in your body, y'all. And like I said earlier, I'm not the best therapist in that I don't fully, intellectually fully buy into emotionally buy into the breathing thing. Intellectually, I get it. And so I have to come up with ways that are fun and playful, because that's the way I learn best. It's the way most of our kids learn best, to make me breathe, right? I'm going to smell a flower. I'm going to blow out a candle or blow that dandelion, right? I'm going to smell a pizza. I'm going to blow to cool it off so that I can eat it. Yum. Same thing with bubbles. Y'all, that is the best therapy tool intervention to have. If you guys have a little soothing, calming box, get you some bubbles ASAP. Because when you think about bubbles, right, you got to pull them out. You got to make sure you don't get all that soap dripping all over you. You got to purse your lips, and you have to breathe slowly and intentionally in order to get that bubble to blow. Automatically, we're doing the kind of breathing that we need to do, right? So powerful. And now we have bubbles, and everyone's happy, right? Hug something. That soothing sensory thing is really helpful. We're putting positive sensory stimuli into our environment. Those sequin pillows, y'all, those are so fantastic. I have about 50 of them in this building, pre-COVID, of course. But it really is a soothing thing. Comfy blankets, stuffed animals, being able to hug something, or like a weighted vest or blanket can also be incredibly helpful here. It's a grounding thing. Normally I give you guys examples of this A to Z list. We're kind of running short on time, so I'm not going to, but it's a grounding skill. You essentially go through each level of each letter of the alphabet by different themes and topics. So first thing you think of, and you go through A, B, C, D, all the way to Z, right? And then you increase the topic to something a little bit harder, like movies, song title or artist. I've done superheroes, coping skills, right? And you usually have to do about 3 to 5 rounds before it truly kind of grounds you. And one of the things about grounding is just as quickly as it comes, it can dissipate. So often with these grounding exercises, we have to do multiple rounds of these things. We've already talked about tensing and relaxing each muscle group and how effective that can be, even if we're not, our brain is still not fully telling us we're safe. And technology is not the devil, y'all. There's a lot of really cool technology out there that can help, and it can help our teenagers who are not really wanting to talk about what's going on with them. The Calm app is fantastic. It has meditations. Meditation jars are just a phone version of those little glitter bottles. There's an app out there called Calm Fear that really is kind of like a CBT-ish approach to working with anxiety. And so really there are a lot of ways that we can intervene using technology and in the moment. Because what do most of us do when we're feeling anxious? We go to our phone, right? And I know you do. And I know we get onto our kids about doing it too. But I know because I do it, right? I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling kind of bored maybe, or I'm needing something to distract me. I go to my phone. And so if we have on our phone something that can help soothe us, that's a great hijack. What else can I do, right? What are some resources? When in doubt, reach out. Red flags truly are when anxiety is getting in the way of your functioning, when you're having really intrusive physical symptoms, which some of you guys have mentioned, sleep disturbances, if it's keeping you from getting your work done or your school done, or it's affecting your relationships, right? You're in fight, flight, freeze, or fold mode, and you can't get this back online. There are lots of different levels of care, and so just because we're having that panic doesn't mean we need to always go to the hospital, although sometimes the hospital is the answer. There are different levels of care. In fact, next week, the presentation that I lost y'all is about levels of care. That's on October 2nd. I believe it's at noon. I'm not 100% sure. If you're interested in learning about levels of care and what the different criteria are and what different benefits are at the levels of care, reach out to me and I can get you that information. And we do have so many community resources like Karen and Christina highlighted at the beginning of the presentation. NAMI, and going to that NAMI site is fantastic. There's so many resources there. Pathlight Mood and Anxiety, again, we're an intensive outpatient partial hospitalization program. We also do free assessments, and so if you're not sure what level of care you need, our clinical admissions team, Round Rocks, his name is Sean, they're fantastic at helping you kind of figure out where you need to go. Austin Child Guidance Center is another local source that's really helpful, and of course the Texas Health and Human Services site can also connect you with other resources. I put the Mobile Outreach Crisis Team for both Travis and Williamson County here. These are our local counties here in the Central Texas area, because sometimes we are in crisis and we need immediate intervention and support. So I'm looking at you teachers there, even parents, right, and things are not working and we need something immediate. The Mobile Outreach Team and the Crisis Intervention Team, these are plainclothes, sometimes plainclothes officers or sometimes trained mental health professionals who have experience in intervening with mental health and getting people to the right level of care or helping soothe them in those moments. That can be incredibly helpful if you're stuck and not sure what to do and can't get someone in the car to go to an emergency room or something. I also included here our Pathlight virtual support groups because like Karen was saying earlier, as strange as this year has been and as much as everyone's kind of struggled to shift gear into the virtual world, it's really brought about some positive things too. We have so many virtual support group options, both some that are specific to our alumni, as you see there at the bottom, but also an anxiety and depression support group. It's open to community members, a family and community support group for loved ones of adolescents with mood and anxiety disorders, right? This is your parent support group, if you will. And one specific support group for people of color, if that's something that you are looking for as well. And so these are some specific virtual support groups until we can be in person again. These are my references, in case you're interested. And I'm going to pull up some of our questions here. Oh, I work at the ERC in Northbrook, Illinois. Hi! Hi, Ashley, my coworker. on a residential floor, so that's a different level of care than I am, but often we have kids who move and adults who move from different levels of care. If you have an email list I can sign up with to get notifications of your trainings like this. Ashley, I will write your name down and figure out how to get you connected to Nikki and our PRL, our public relations person, to make sure you're getting those. I'll be honest, I don't always know when I'm doing presentations, but I can make sure that we get you connected. I appreciate it. Thank you, Ashley. And she just said this was helpful. Okay, let's go here to our chat and see what we've got here. Okay. I also like the sounds of the birds at the beginning, y'all. Ooh, this is kind of hard to scroll through, so give me just a second. Clients experiencing more severe anxiety from Veronica. I completely agree. Again, I think that what's going on in our world in a variety of levels is really inhibiting our ability to kind of have that come down and that up and down that we normally do. I tend to speak like Yoda, so somebody else can really relate to whom that person was from the Q&A. Oh, thank you, Tina, of just saying, I hope y'all can share the slides. I'd love to share with my children and coworkers. Like I said, I have no problem with that. I'll pass these on to Christina and Karen. That was me at my first yoga class. I'm not sure what that's connected to, but hopefully that was not the severe diuretic episode. Maybe? I don't know. Yes. Sending the slides. Oh, no questions in chat, just comments, I think, from Karen. Awesome. What types of practitioners should I be? Oh, we kind of looked at this. Oh, question received from email. How to break the cycle when the person starts talking about negative feelings? Do we let the person complain or do we try to distract the person? This is a great question. I do a parent support group on Fridays for our parents who have kids currently in treatment, and we talk a lot about validation. And one of the things that we as parents and adults and really just loved ones do, right? I'm going to use the example that I get all the time from a kid in school. I'm stupid. Our first response, no, you're not. And we just invalidated their experience, and we told them that what they're experiencing is wrong. And so it's an advanced level skill to learn how to validate these kinds of emotions and the negative self-talk. One of the specific types of modalities that can be really helpful with learning that advanced level skill is a modality called emotionally focused family therapy, or EFFT. And it helps us learn how to validate things like anger, validate things like silence, and validate these negative feelings in a way that does not dismiss them or invalidate them. That's really hard, Christina, and it's going to take some advanced practice in that. But I encourage you to meet it with validation. It makes sense that you feel stupid because you studied for that test, and because you really wanted to do well, and because most people in this world connect academics to intelligence. And that's not the way that I perceive you, right? And so then that's the way that we can distract. Man, it really feels like we're stuck in this. And that makes sense to me because these negative thoughts are really hard and they can play in a loop. Let's go do something else for a minute, and then maybe we can come back and sit down and talk about these things a little bit more and see if we're feeling differently, right? But again, if we're trying to force them out of that space, we're telling them that experiencing negative things is wrong and invalid. And I don't know about y'all, but I experience all kinds of negative emotions. And in order to experience positive emotions, we got to experience the negative ones too. It's like Brene Brown says, this is not a water faucet where we can just turn on the hot water or the positive, great, happy emotions and leave the cold or the negative ones off. That's just not how it works, right? Okay, it looks like I answered the questions in chat. Here's some in the Q&A. I lost my connection early in the presentation. Karen said, you addressed my question about hands being clumsy or being clumsy handshaking. Yes, like we talked about, right, there are biological functions that are happening with the hippocampus that are impairing your spatial awareness when you're hijacked by emotions and anxiety. And while that can absolutely be true, I also encourage you to make sure that you are making sure there's not a medical thing that's also happening. And so once you get kind of that medical clearance, then really digging in and addressing that anxiety, potentially from an exposure and response prevention approach, or even just other anxiety approaches that we've talked about. What supplement or food might help people with anxiety, or any type of exercise that you might recommend? Absolutely. Getting our body moving can be incredibly helpful. It doesn't even matter so much what it is, right? You could just be going for a slow-paced walk. I'm somebody who the most effective thing for me is being outside in the woods, right, or being by water. Those things are super helpful for me. My sister, not so much, right? She likes to exercise in her house with, like, the beach body thing, right? Again, it doesn't matter what it is, but getting our body moving can be really helpful. As far as, like, food or things, if you're feeling nauseous and you're not wanting to eat and it's that mechanical, think about, like, the brat diet, right? The things that we would eat when we're feeling anxious. We don't want to put something real heavy on us, right? We don't want to put something real greasy on us, but something that's really going to still give our body the signal that it's enough that we need to digest it, but not enough that it's going to impair us. If the eating thing is something that's playing into anxiety, I also encourage you maybe to involve like a dietitian or someone like a nutritionist who has some kind of very specific experience in that, because again, mood and food go together so much so, which is part of why our sister company is Eating Recovery Center, right? These things go together. How does one go about getting a mental evaluation test? Sorry, y'all, I'm new to working on my mental health. Oh, there's no reason to apologize. There are a lot of people out there who are ostriches about this, so bravo to you, first of all. There's a lot of different ways. You can start just by talking with a therapist, right? They're clinically trained to help kind of sort out. In fact, this is one of my favorite images. I'm not sure if y'all can see this. I have this in my office, right? See this person here who's got all this stuff going on, and it's the therapist's job to sort through that and help them water back their little plant, right? And if they're suggesting that you need something like a neuropsych, right, or something of that nature, they can make those recommendations from there. So if you're functioning, if you're able to, if you're just starting to work on that, explore those resources. There's lots of great things out there through NAMI or through, like Psychology Today is a great resource to find a therapist in your area. You can scroll through and identify based on insurance and type of therapy, age, what your preferences are for what you're looking for as a therapist. And then again, from there, like I said, we do have free assessments, and so if you're more in a crisis and you're not sure if you need a higher level of care, I would definitely encourage you guys to seek that out. And Sean and our clinical admissions team can definitely help you figure out maybe what steps to take. And again, maybe another outlet is to attend that presentation about the different levels of care. And as you can see, my email address is here on this slide that I'm still sharing. Feel free to send me an email, and I'm happy to send you that information. Do you have any tools available for someone who's interested in finding a therapist help, but who has no experience? Similar question. Awesome. I've tried finding help online, and every time I'm overwhelmed and very confused by the many, many options and acronyms out there. Oh, great question. So there are a lot of different options and things out there. Like I said, Psychology Today is a really great resource to take some of these many, many options and narrow them down into finding a therapist. And so going on to Psychology Today, and then you can put based on your region, your zip code. So now I've narrowed it down, right? I actually live in Round Rock, so seeing somebody in South Austin is not ideal, although I could do it virtually right now, sure. But when we go back to in-person, I don't want someone in South Austin. I want someone up here. So I can give a zip code. I can put in my insurance. And so now I know only people who take my insurance are on there. There are certainly people out there who, great clinicians who don't take insurance, but who do sliding scales. And so sometimes that's in there, and you can sort through that. Same thing with the acronyms and modalities. There's a way that you can choose people who only do that type of modality, but if those things overwhelm and confuse you, don't search any of those, right? Again, I encourage you to kind of look at their website, ask for, a free 30-minute check-in to see if you like them. But really with what you're doing, like you can put anxiety, right? And anyone who works directly with anxiety will kind of, and also takes insurance and also is in that thing, will pop up. And that's a really great way to really narrow that list down. Another really great resource is to contact your insurance. They have case managers that you can talk to this one person and say, this is what I'm dealing with and this is what I'm looking for, and they can help coordinate that to you and send you a list so that you're not the one having to do that. Same thing like if your company, if your job work has an EAP, that's another really great way. An employee assistance program is what EAP stands for. They usually give you like 6 free sessions or something, so that's a great way to get started to see if you like someone and to kind of go through that and have that list sent to you rather than you having to navigate that. Also, being from Austin, which is a big old college town, we got colleges all, north and south of us and all those things. Often graduate schools have professional counseling departments where clinicians who are studying to be counselors are doing sessions, right? I had to work in one of those when I was in school. We do practicums, we do internships. It's a great way to try out that therapy and get some immediate support in a way that is not navigating the whole mental health world, right? And what's great is that these people are also being supervised by professors. I would tell you guys a story if I had more time about being recorded during one of those sessions, and that was fun. Great way for us to learn, great way for you to start to navigate therapy and trust and know that you have someone who has supervision that's happening too. I hope that answered your question. If not, or if you're still needing some support, feel free to email me, and I'm happy to follow up. There's one more thing here in the chat. I don't see that there. I was going to share one other thing with you guys. I see a couple of us have left the call, and that's just fine. I'm going to have Christina and Karen send this along with the tools, but I love this little handout about coping skills. As we have just a few more minutes, I thought that I would share this as well. I found this on Pinterest, and I love it because one of the things I hear most often from people who are dealing with mental health issues or anxiety or just struggling to cope at all are like, Miss, I tried the skills that you taught me and it didn't work, right? I'm sure some of you teachers or your parents out there, you hear that all the time. I tried the thing and it didn't work. Well, often, or maybe you're telling yourself that, who knows? Like I said yesterday, I tried to breathe and I'm still crying. Anyways, there are all these different categories of coping skills: distraction, grounding, emotional release, self-love, thought challenges, accessing your higher self. And we all have different needs, and each of these, what we call positive or adaptive coping skills, also have a maladaptive version. And I like this handout because it gives you examples of what each of the categories are. It also gives you pros and cons to using that particular category, which is incredibly important to think about, right? Like for this grounding, sometimes it can be a con, and sometimes it can be better to stay a little bit disconnected from yourself. That's part of how your mind and your body can protect you from those short-term things. Again, the problem is when it's long-term. But a pro is that it can really reduce the physicality of anxiety. And so going through this, I kind of want to highlight what the maladaptive versions are, because if you are dealing with urges, if you are dealing with behaviors that are maladaptive, knowing what the adaptive version of that maladaptive thing can help you figure out what types of skills to use. So the maladaptive version of distraction is substance use, right? So if you're having urges or if you are engaging in excessive drinking or substance use, right, you're distracting yourself in a maladaptive way, and finding ways to distract yourself in an adaptive, positive way can help meet that urge and that need differently than, say, engaging in thought challenges, right? Same thing with grounding. The maladaptive version of that is self-harm, right? Because this is a whole other presentation that I give, but self-harm can be incredibly grounding, and it can really bring you back to the now, but it's maladaptive, and so finding ways to ground. If you're having self-harm urges and you distract, it can be helpful for a very short period of time, but you're probably still going to have those urges pretty strongly in a very short period of time again, and that can make you just want to do it even more. And so I really kind of like to highlight how using the correct category is just as important as using any skill. A maladaptive version of an emotional release is an uncontrolled emotional release. The person asking about what types of exercises, this is a great example, right? It's about being intentional. self-love, the opposite of that is that negative self-talk, right? That self-hatred, that low, poor self-esteem, putting others before yourself constantly. That's a maladaptive version of self-love. Thought challenges, the maladaptive version of that is believing that my thoughts are facts, that my feelings are facts, which is not true as much as we think that it is, right? And these are challenging those negative thoughts and really working to add in some positive or some neutral thoughts to those negative thoughts. And accessing your higher self, this is one I also do a lot. What ways are you contributing? What ways are you helping others? This is part of the reason why I do presentations, is because it helps me cope, y'all. So thank you for that, and thank you for your time and allowing that. Is this coping skills page available somewhere? Yes, I found this on Pinterest. I'm going to send it to Karen and Christina so that they can include that with a PowerPoint presentation that I sent, or that I will send. Okay, that looks like I've answered the questions. Oh, there's 2 more things in the chat. Oh, thank you, Karen. Karen found the link to this coping skills handout on Pinterest. Great job, Karen. You're so quick.
Well, I was really intrigued with it. It's like, oh, that is really good. I literally was copying the link and sending it to my daughters. And so,
right?
you know, it's just a really nice, easy to follow piece. So I thought, oh, we definitely want to share that. So that it was way easier to find than I thought it would be. Thank goodness for, you know, the internet, right?
Right.
Wendi, that was really fabulous. I can tell from all the feedback that we got that folks really appreciated, you know, everything that you shared today. It was a lot. And so I really do appreciate your willingness to share your slides. And then, of course, as we mentioned, we'll have a recording that we'll send out to everyone. We'll send your slides out as well as a link to this particular graphic that you just shared, because I think that'll be really helpful. And then we'll also have the recording on our website as well, on our Mind Matters page. So if somebody really liked it, they can say, hey, here's the link. You know, you can watch it anytime on demand there. Some of us may need a refresher, right, in a few weeks. So anyway.
I know I do. Like I said, I even professionally trained and all these years post-grad, I still need the reminders.
Yeah, we all do. I mean, there were things that there were things that you said that I've heard before, but it was like, oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. So incredibly helpful, especially during this time. We appreciate you and the great partnership, and we thank everyone that was able to join us today. And, you know, stay healthy, be well, and we look forward to having an opportunity to see you all again for our next session on In Our Own Voice that's coming up, and you'll be getting information about that. So thank you and have a great day.